What's going on, everybody? Like I told you guys in the last episodes, I have a full-time job where I work from Monday to Friday, and at the same time, I'm building an agency on the side, Converge Story. Because I'm in the beginning of building the agency, I have a lot of things that I need to do as far as like marketing for the agency and finding customers, and doing that while doing the full-time job is not an easy thing. So finding the time to write the episodes, because I'm also, doing the podcast in a way that is unusual compared to how other podcasts are run, right? Most of podcasts have guests, which, like you saw with Serge, I tried to do, but there's a lot of things that go into and logistics that go into having guests on, that trying to do that while having a full-time job and while building a business on the side is just so difficult. And I'm going to try to have as many conversations as I can during the year. But in between, I still want to show up for you guys and share things, and honestly also show up for myself, because I don't want, this is like my baby in a way. It's weird to call it that, but it's my project. I really love the podcast, and I think on a long-term horizon, it can be very useful for me and for you guys, for people who are trying to build a business, or business owners, people already have businesses. I want to have conversations with people who are actually in the deep end of things, marketing and different aspects of business. And I think that it can just be useful on a long-term horizon. I think it can be useful for me and for you. That being said, for me to be able to get to that point, I really have to stay consistent. And staying consistent while doing it at the highest level that I want to do it, from a production perspective and from everything that goes into producing the podcast and filming and editing and everything, is really challenging. At least it's proving to be challenging if I combine it with other things that I'm doing. So I made the decision that I'm going to sort of strip down the production, strip down the work that I was putting into, overproducing the podcast and editing the podcast. I want to keep it as real and raw with you guys, and I want to do as minimal of editing as possible. I want to make it as easy as humanly possible for me to do this, because if I'm going to, stay consistent and at the same time do grow the business to where I want it to be by the end of this year, and still keep the full-time job, because I still have to pay the bills and keep the lights on. That is literally my full-time job, is what is funding this business and the podcast. I'm gonna have to make it as easy for me to show up and for me to sit down and just go. And that is from an ideas perspective, meaning what do I talk about? I want to talk about things that I'm interested in, but I also think that you're going to find useful. And you, by you, I mean my target audience, at least the audience that I'm trying to build through this podcast, which is people who are on their entrepreneurship journey or who want to go on their entrepreneurship journey. I want to share things that I'm learning from what I'm doing, and things that people I'm getting inspired by, and things that I'm finding interesting and useful. And by making it as easy as possible, that's how I can stay consistent. And I mentioned that because I think you can find that you can find something useful in that, right? when you are going to start a business, you literally have two ways. You can either quit your job and fully go into building your business, which if you have the ability to do that, that's the best way to do it, because you can give that business, whatever it is, your maximum time and attention, and it's more likely that it will grow faster if you're able to quit everything and focus only on that. Number two, the second way to do that, to start a business if you have a full-time job, is gonna be to keep your full-time job and find ways to spend the time that you're not working on the business. And there are two things that are really important. You need to make sure that the quality of your full-time job stays really, really high, right? That your business is not diluting the quality of the work that you do in your full-time job, because you're still getting paid to do fucking your job. And at the same time, you need the job to be able to fund the business that you're doing. But also the second thing that comes with that is you really need to be selfish, and to be selfish in terms of protecting your time from distractions, protecting your time from making sure that you are focused in the business that you are trying, which that is interesting, because for you to be able to even know what business you start, you need to experiment. And when I mean that you need to focus, is you need to be focused in terms of running the experiments that you're running. So if you have an idea, let's say you have an idea to make a new phone, that's your business idea. You need to experiment with who do you think is going to be your audience, who's going to buy it, what problem is it going to solve, and whatever. On that stage, please be as unfocused as possible. Don't focus on anything. Have ideas, have hypotheses, and experiment. But once you find something that is working, you need to double down and focus on it. And for the last couple of months, for me, I've been in the experimenting phase. And I told you guys that I was experimenting with not only my, target audience and the problems that I want to solve for them, but also the offers that I was going to offer them. And it was a lot of work, a lot of things that go into, when you're choosing, let's say for me, I was, I'm going to create an offer around weddings. And when you create an offer around weddings, I'm also creating ads, and I'm also creating landing pages and everything. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And then I'm creating an offer that's going to be helping dentists with their video sales letters, meaning optimizing their funnels and everything. That, funnel, that lane has a lot of work that goes into that itself. And from the data that I've been collecting, I have a lane that I think is going to work based on what I saw and based on what I've done so far. And I want to double down on that. And that's why I'm probably not going to be finding a lot of time, because I'm one person who is doing literally every single step of that, of the way, meaning marketing for that offer, fulfillment for the offer. So if it's a video, I'm producing the videos, I'm editing the videos, I'm doing everything that goes into fulfilling that offer. And at the same time, that is on top of my full-time job. So the time that I have between 5 p.m. to when I go to bed, I'm also really, really serious about working out and fitness. And I've been running. I literally ran 15K yesterday. It's really important to me. So that is a priority. So how much time do I spend between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. on the business is gonna determine how much I how much successful I'm able to be within this year. And this year, like I really, really want to get it to a point where it can set the foundation for me to quit my job. That's not gonna be easy. It's gonna take a lot of sacrifices, and it's gonna take me trying to find ways to find time from other places, family, working out. I'm probably gonna slack on that. And maybe the time that I spent watching shows and reading books is gonna have to decrease. And the time that I spent preparing for the podcast is probably gonna it's not probably, I'm making a decision for that to reduce. So trying to find time from different places. But the podcast is really, really important to me, that I don't want it to stop. So instead of stopping it or putting a pause on it until the business gets to a point where I can invest in hiring people who helps me with the podcast and still like produce the quality that I want it to be at, I'm just gonna do it the way that I can. And that means doing it this way, just coming on and talking about what is on my mind. And I think for the right person, it's still useful. Um, because the lesson there, by even like me doing it this way, is that you need to be scrappy and you need to work with what you have. And it's not gonna be perfect. You're not gonna, you, you will never have perfect conditions. At least it's been that case for me. And I, if it was up to me, like I would only focus on this business, on this podcast. I really love doing the podcast. I really love the idea of meeting people through it. And it has the potential to be a business that allows me to have financial freedom and location freedom, which is really, really important to me. The idea of waking up in Seattle because I have a podcast that I'm filming there and I'm meeting a person and getting to explore Seattle through the podcast, and going for runs in New York City, and exploring New York City because I have a podcast recording that I need to do there, or freaking going overseas because I have people that I need to interview, and getting to explore the world through the podcast and conversations with people. That's literally my dream. That's my end goal. If you ask me like what do I want to do with my life on a long-term horizon, is that it's exploring the world and having interesting conversations with people, that being able to fund my life and the life of my family. But I also think that I would be able to have the most impact on the type of person who is interested in exploring the world and living a fulfilling life and building businesses and building things and creating things in the world than I would if I just didn't, focused on building a business and didn't create. Um, but that being said, I can't have that life right now. I just can't. The mechanics of what goes into building the podcast to where it gives me that, it's gonna take a really long time. And building the business, building the agency is the quickest way for me to transition from working full time to entrepreneurship. I have all the building blocks, honestly. Like I have really useful skills that I can use to genuinely improve businesses from a marketing perspective. And I have all the skills that I need to start the business from marketing to fulfillment. The only barrier is time and attention and focus. And that is, yeah, that is the point where I need to, that's the point of leverage. That's the leverage that I have. And it's the scarcity element in my life. So I need to forget about the dream, right? Um, and all the things, all the ideas that I have for the podcast and how I want to produce it and the cameras that I want to use and the places that I want to film in and the conversations that I want to have and all the things that I want to explore through it so that I can focus on the business that could fund that and be able unlock my ability to be able to have that through the podcast, because the reality is making building the podcast in into a business that gets to that level is so much more difficult than building the agency. It just is. The mechanics of the podcast as a business are really difficult compared to, are much more complex and difficult to reach compared to the agency. So that's how I'm approaching it, and I'm just going to be having fun with it, raw and real, and come on here and be your companion, the guy who is going through it, like you. And the honest answer is that I'm as much figuring it out as you are. And I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm figuring it out as you are. And, I could sit here and lie to you that I have some sort of access to knowledge or access to things that you don't know. But I think what I would bring to the table is, instead of trying to be to preach to you and teach you or pretend like I know better, is to the value that I would provide to you. The value that I would provide is the value that I would provide is to make you feel less alone and to be as honest about my journey, my entrepreneurship journey, as possible. And hopefully by you seeing me go through the kind of things that you are going through, you don't quit. That's my hope. Because if you don't quit, you will not lose. You can scale down, like bite what you can chew, the same way that I'm doing it. Use the resources that are available to you and do what you can with the resources that you have. But if you quit, it's a wrap. It's done, dude. Like, literally, I have something that I really like to say, that it only works if you do. And that is so true, man. Like, it only freaking works if you do. If I stop recording this podcast, right now, if I missed it, there would not be an episode. And if there's no episode, there's no podcast. If there's no podcast, there's no business. 10 years from now, there's nothing. But if I show up as I am, right, within the time that I have, 30 minutes or 45 minutes that I'm able to have, and instead of spending 5 days trying to edit it and making it like the highest quality that I can, instead only spend 30 minutes to an hour, prepping it and posting it, and spend the rest of the time focusing on the agency, then I can do it, right? It's not gonna get as many views, as many, engagements. It's not gonna build the audience that as quickly as I want it to, but it's fine. It's okay because I understand this is maintenance mode, and the one person who's gonna be watching and following, if it helps them know that, there's someone else who understands what it's like to start a business and go through all the hardships, all the no's, all the things that you have to do, I think it's a win. And then you keep the momentum. I keep the momentum. I don't lose the momentum. And maybe, God willing, the agency, when it starts to work, then I can invest in the podcast and have the conversations that I want to have. But yeah, I don't wanna stop it because it's getting hard. And the honest, like if there's something that I learned from running and working out in general, and this is why I freaking love working out and running, is because you realize, like yesterday I ran 15K for the first time in a really, really long time, because I was focused on lifting and strength training instead of running. Is like the last kilometer, like it was, every fiber in my body like wanted me to stop, and I kept going. And you realize that you stop way, way, way before you reach your capacity, like your full capacity. And the reality is that I can choose to say, that I don't have enough time for this podcast and I need to focus on the business. Yes, focus is important. I always say it. Focus is important. But I genuinely have like a feeling in my heart that this podcast is, in a long term, could be really, really impactful. Like, there's something special about when I sat down with Serge, having people reach out and saying, bro, I'm trying to do the same thing that Serge is doing. And I found that podcast really, really helpful. And this is the steps that I'm taking. Like, there's something about that. There's something about that makes me feel like I need to make sure that this thing becomes something that can only happen if I stay consistent. So that was a very, very long way of saying that scaling it down, and I'm making it as raw and real as possible. And whenever I get a chance to have a conversation, I'll have the conversation. But the podcast is my second priority. It's not my first priority. My first priority is building the agency while maintaining my full-time job. And then I will do as much as possible to stay consistent with the podcast. But it is my second priority. Which, man, like, speaking of the journey of building something, like, you really need to pivot. And at the beginning of the year, like, I thought that this podcast was gonna be my focus, my full focus. I felt like I was in the pocket, like I had so many ideas of who the guests. I mean, I have been reaching out to guests and inviting people on the podcast and everything. And if they like, if things align, I will still like have those conversations. But when I realized that making money from the podcast, the kind of money that I want to, get to anyway, turning the podcast into the business that I want to, the kind of business that I want to build, is gonna take way longer than it would take if I made the agency the priority instead. And that in the long term would be a better decision for the podcast, because then I would, take the money from the agency and invest them in the podcast, and maybe in the long term use the agency as the production company for the podcast. Like, it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. And because it does, you can't be romantic about your previous decisions and your previous ideas. You have to be, when you learn new information, when you get new information, when something makes more sense than what made sense before, you need to pivot. You need to change. You can't say this is how I imagined my business to be if the market or your circumstances prove you wrong, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you wanted to do things if the way you're doing things is not gonna work. If you learn that the way you're doing things is not gonna work, freaking pivot, like, as quickly as possible. And that applies to a product, that applies to a service, that applies to an avatar. Like, if you're targeting people and you realize that the product you're making or the service that you're providing is not resonating with those people, you need to do something different. The market doesn't lie. Yeah, those were a few thoughts that I had on my mind, and this is exactly how the podcast is going to be moving forward. Um, yeah, it's going to be more real and raw, and just me sitting down and talking to you guys about what I have on my mind. And yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's still gonna be fun. I think it's going to be more interesting, honestly. Um, you know, to not over prepare and like spend. Um, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it goes. Let me about found it and issue as well. Hope you don't quit. Um, to to different change doing it, but things. It's the only if you work. If you need to and come as I'll see you guys